Alright, so good morning. I'm looking forward to seeing 159 students here, perhaps in the future. I think this morning people are all still trying to figure everything out, so don't hesitate to email me or to chat me on Mattermost if you're having trouble figuring out how to connect with me. For now, I thought I might just begin going through today's lab, this Bob's interface lab. So yeah, as it says I'll need to download these files, I'd like to go ahead and create myself a little project to hold that. So I'm here in my Eclipse. Which seems to be out of date because I've recently added a JRE. Let's just see if those got installed or not. 14 is default, that seems good. Let's call this interfaces with Bob. Yeah, this would be good for me. Okay. In this case, I don't need a module. Alright, so now let's go ahead and do this show in and System Explorer thing. Takes me here. Alright, so I've got aisle, I want to put it there. I've got limited aisle, also there. Customer, Mart simulation, and Mart driver. Excellent. Why don't I go ahead and refresh this? Okay. Another thing that might be good to do is to go ahead and tell check style to be active for this project. Okay. So right now, got a bunch of problems about styling. Might just run through and let these auto format real quick so I can get rid of any extraneous formatting issues and have this problems view be more useful to me. Okay, so not too bad now in terms of these things. Alright, so let's take a look here. So we need to create a new class that extends aisle. Well, let's just take a look at what aisle can do. So I like to take a quick peek at my outline over here. I call it my little cheat sheet. And so that's showing that we have this random number generator available to us. We have an item delay and start. There's going to be a line, which is an array list of customers, it looks like. There's a maximum weight, num items on the belt, etc. Okay. Very good. What does a customer do? They've got the time they entered some items. Okay. We've already got a limited aisle that extends aisle. Okay. We've got a driver provided already to basically set some values and begin the simulation. And we've got the simulation. Okay, great. So, let's see. Why don't we send out a quick announcement to our class. You know, when do you want to send an announcement to people, and when do you want to just message via Canvas? It's unclear. Spelling is fun, okay. It's funny we have this allow liking thing. I don't think it's obvious to students that Canvas has a liking interface. Cool. Okay, so yeah, let's get ourselves a new class. It's going to be called sorted aisle, and I'm going to go ahead and throw in here that I want aisle to be, hello, yeah, that's the one, okay. Boom. Why is it mad at me? Okay, that's fine. All right. So at the very least, we need to override add customer, but also you'll notice here that it's annoyed with me because there's no empty constructor in aisle. So we're going to need to add at least this constructor to make things work out okay. Now let's see here. All right, so we need to override the, okay. And let's just make sure we're doing that correctly. I kind of expected Eclipse, once I had put the override indicator in there for me, to show actually what my superclass's signature was like, but it's not hard to go steal it. It's predictably, yeah, okay, good. It's as I would expect from the naming convention. It's add, which takes a customer, of course, and is a void. So good, we're on the right track. All right, so cool. So our superclasses version of this, as if you notice, it goes ahead and just adds this customer to the line. That's exactly what we need to do, except every time a customer is added, this list should be sorted. Okay, so we can handle that. So why don't we just call our super okay. So that's pretty cool. And then what we'd really like to do now is we'd like to be able to say that this line that we have inherited, and there's a convenient getter for, or else we would not have easy access to it, actually needs to be sorted now. So, as it suggests in the write-up, we'd like to use the collections sort. Now, why doesn't this sort method that I'm looking at here return the collection back to me, right? So it's going to sort this thing, but then it doesn't give me the result. Well, if you kind of read into the documentation there, it actually lets you know that this is a mutating method. So this is going to sort the collection that you pass in directly. So you don't need the return value from this because it is changing the argument that you pass in. All right. So this should be pretty good. Let me just save. And now it's angry with me. And I can, if I had this expanded, I would already be able to see. It's not applicable for the arguments. Okay, what does that even mean? Well, it's already hinted at for us here in the specs, right? So in the specification there, it lets me know that in order for this to work out, the assumption of collections.sort is that the type that you're sorting, ultimately this is going to be sorting customers, should implement the comparable interface. So we're going to actually have to modify customer to do so. All right. I don't remember if this is something, I don't want to extract an interface. I actually want to source. Yeah, okay. Oh, I guess if I throw it at the top, it's going to do this stuff for us. So let's try it out. So yeah, let's implement comparable of what type? Customer. Okay, and now you notice that the other error that I had that was in my sorted aisle just went away, right? So now this line is really happy, but we swapped it out for a different error, right? And so the error now is that we need to implement the method as follows, right? Compared to. So conveniently, I can say, yeah, let's do that. Okay, so they throw one at the bottom for me here. Naturally return 0 is not a great way to implement compared to. So the question is, what exactly is compared to? All right, so let's take a step back for a minute. All right, what is the goal? We're trying to have a sorted aisle here, and we would like for that aisle to keep the customer sorted, okay? And the customer with the fewest items is always going to move to the front. So this means that if you want to get through Bob's Mart most quickly, you should check out n times, one for each item that you have. So you always get to be the first person in the line. And you can just keep skipping each other person as you is to sort in program, like when we write our algorithms directly. Let's just take a quick peek. Yeah, so, you know, fine. Let's 2 minutes. That sounds great. Okay. So if we make this a little bigger for a moment, let's see, it's going to go onto the wrong screen, maybe. No, it looks okay. So you can see in these teeny tiny text at the top, there's selection sort, insert sort, binary insertion, merge. There's so many different kinds of sorts. And we could write this ourselves. We could write the algorithms that we're seeing visualized here. And that is a good practice to learn how these things are actually working. And so that's something that you'll probably see a bit more of in your 240 or data structures class. But for our purposes, we're really delighted that actually, for most cases, we can just benefit from using the existing sort that has been implemented in the Java SDK. All right. The key thing that we have to do to support Java's SDK and being able to sort arbitrary objects for us, right? When they wrote collections.sort, they had no idea that we were going to come along and make our very own customer class and expect them to be able to sort different objects of this type. We just need to tell Java, hey, this is how you look at a customer and know, are they kind of equivalent in ordering, or is is one of those elements considered to be first or second in comparison to the other. So that's what the compare to method is for. The compare to method is basically to say, okay, this instance of customer, all right, the one that is kind of contained in the class here, versus the one that is passed in, which one is considered to be first, right? So let's take a look here, okay, and it says we should return 0, positive, or negative, and this object is less as when we return negative. Let's just put a note to ourselves here, okay? Return a negative value when this object should come before O. The other instance of customer, let's call it the other customer object to compare this customer. How do you spell words? Link. I don't really need a link, friends. All right. This window's a little narrow. I think we can trade out with the specs a little bit here so that you can get to see a bit more reasonable size of that. And really for now, we don't really need the sidebar so much, so maybe that can help us out. Okay. Cool. So we understand that we should consider one customer to go before another customer according to our specs here when they have fewer items in their cart. So what we need to know is all right, cool. Well, so the first question is, how many items are in my cart, right? So if you notice in our outline view again, our little cheat sheet, we can see num items is just directly available to us, right? So I don't like to fully type things out there. I like to, even for short things, I like to use autocomplete when possible to make sure that I'm not mistyping and referring to a variable that may not exist. So if the number of items, right, so that's the number of items in kind of this cart, if that's less than the number of items in the other cart, then we need to return a negative value, right? 0 indicates that these two customers are considered equivalent for the current comparison, and since we only care about their number of items, and in order to order them, then we only need to check the number of items, right, to return 0. So now again, this is not the same as the equals method that we sometimes override that tells us whether we consider two customer objects generally to be equivalent to each other. That would typically be by comparing like their enter time and their num items or something. Usually most of the fields are important. This is only to know which customer should go first in line, right? So that's why we only need to compare that thing. All right. So I don't need this return 0 down here because I've covered every case. I do need to format. Okay. And yeah, it's looking fine here. Okay. So what is it mad about over here? What machine? What? Unused. Oh, you have to say param o unused tag for the try again. Save it or something. Okay, that's better. Looks like I made this line too long. I don't like where it chose to wrap it though, so let's help it out here. Okay, that's considered a short enough line. Cool. So let's see, what have we done so far? Here we go. All right, so we've got our sorted aisle, and we had it use the collections.sort method. It's letting us know here, like, the exact syntax for typing out comparable. That's really helpful to know. In my case, I let Eclipse autocomplete it for me, and so it prompted me to put the correct thing in here. And so, like the example suggests, I did put the example in there. Okay, so now that we have our sorted aisle, we need to continue to modify the Mart simulation. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. If I hit Command Shift T or Control Shift T on Windows, I can say I'd like to open up the Mart simulation, and that's just a quick way to be able to switch between the different classes in my current workspace, my current project, so I don't have to keep showing and hiding that Explorer sidebar over there. Let's see. Oh, team, there's an exciting person on Twitch inviting me to be famous with followers. They didn't know I already have a ton of students that would like to see what I'm saying. That's funny. Okay. Oh, I see why it broke the line. It was trying to do this nice formatting. Okay. Sorry, back on track. Once you have completed your sorted aisle, let's have it use the Mart simulation. Use sorted aisle instead of limited aisle. Okay. So right here, we're going to want to do sorted aisle. And let's just check. Okay, so by making those changes, I have the compiler is helping me out to know when I've introduced errors now throughout. So indeed, we'll want to probably copy this so that it's available to us to fix these errors throughout. Now his okay.
I'm drawing my name.
So
Type my name on your computer.
what did you say, darling? Charlie wanted to say hello or something. I couldn't hear him because of my headphones. All right, so now here's a question. As I went through and changed everything, in the Mart simulation, when we are creating previously limited aisles, we have to let them know the max length in the limited aisle. Since a sorted aisle doesn't have that same construct, I think we can actually just remove that. But why don't we just check our specs to make sure we're not making any bad assumptions here. Okay. Yeah, why don't we go ahead and use these tests? That sounds like a great suggestion. I'll have to show this temporarily. We need to refresh so that the test can be found. And let's just take a look here. Why? Oh, it's mad because why? You recognize this error? Because we haven't. But maybe this one will help out. There we go. We haven't added JUnit 5 to this project yet. Hello. There we go. So now that's happy. Okay. And then of course you don't need the grading tier parts in yours. So maybe we'll actually upload a version of this that doesn't have that for you. Likewise. Okay, so before we carry on, we should observe that. What did I do now? Who's mad? Grading. Oh, I need to save something. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see. They point out that we should expect to get rather short average weights, but very long longest weights. Okay, so let's just run the Mart driver here. Okay, so average weight, 8 minutes. Seems great. Well, it seems great compared to 361. I don't know how long I'd like to wait in a grocery line. So this was how many, this was with 1,294 customers. That's pretty great. With only 8 cashiers, okay? And I don't remember in the driver. That's the number of customers, okay? Okay, right, with 8 cashiers, as it says here. Okay, cool. And running over 8 hours. Okay, let's run it again and see how it comes out compared to 8.6 and 362. A little longer on the average, a little shorter on the max. Okay, cool. 6 minutes, I can do that. Yeah, I could do 6 minutes in a grocery line. So I can run it several times because of there's random components in this thing, right? So I don't expect to get exactly the same values every time. Okay, so then they suggest that perhaps we would like to actually test with the provided test classes. So that's a good suggestion. So why don't we run with our JUnit tests? And they're happy. Let's go ensure that we're happy with the testing though. So test that the aisle is sorted. Okay, yeah, we're pretty confident we've done that okay. And let's see, if we go over to the customer test, we've got test compared to equal. Like, can we understand two customers? So these are several tests that we can compare two customers to know correctly whether they're less, greater, or equal to each other. Okay, well, it seems like that's pretty good for this lab. But now, what might be nice is if we didn't have to go through and change that type, right? So how can we modify, right, this Mart driver in simulation so that it doesn't matter whether we do a regular aisle, a limited aisle, or a sorted aisle, right? So this is important, right? Because these extend from each other, we should not have to use instance of. So I will leave this as an exercise to the reader, and you're very welcome to hop on a call with me so that we can work this part out together. So I'm going to remain available and online here, but I'm going to just drop off the mic until there's someone to talk to me or we have something else to say. Okay, good morning there. Just wondering if any 159 students have joined. If you have, you can, of course, chat with me on Mattermost or else on either of these live streaming platforms. You should also have a link to my Zoom in which you'll be able to share your video and voice if you want to talk with me. So my idea for right now is a bit similar to what I started with around 9 today, which is just to start working on the interfaces lab together a little bit. So I guess stay tuned if that sounds interesting to you. Cool. So the interfaces lab today is kind of more of Bob's Grocery. But the idea here is that this time we actually, rather than only having those aisle and limited aisle that you may remember from earlier labs, and just to remind you, an aisle is essentially kind of one of the cashiers, basically. And in running our simulations, it's helping the Bob's Grocery Mart decide, how many staff do they need to employ to be able to check people out in parallel, by running different simulations and trying out different values. So the limited aisle was a specialization of aisle. So that is to say that limited aisle extends aisle. And a limited aisle, if you can think back to it, let me see if I can quickly find this other lab. Let's see. So, okay. Limited. How do you spell? This is clearly not the one I'm looking for. So I may not be able to find it as quickly as I would like. Oh, polymorphism, perhaps. Nope, that's a Bernstein lab. So indeed, I cannot find it quickly. So we can just take a sneak peek. There you go. So yeah, the limited aisle was very similar to an aisle from which it's inheriting, except this one has a maximum number of customers that are allowed to be in this line, and it tracks how many people gave up because they were not able to get into line, basically, right? All right, so now instead of only having two kinds of aisle, that's the limited aisle and the general aisle, we want to have the sorted aisle. And in a sorted aisle, people do not stand in a strict queue of first come, first serve. Instead, in a sorted aisle, whoever is in the line and has the fewest items, they get to go first each time. Okay. So, that's a little bit weird. I think we could all immediately see how to exploit this. We could just complete our shopping order if the store is busy anyways, by going in and purchasing one item at a time until we can complete our whole list. But that's not our problem here. So let's just take a look at how we would do this. So given that they've provided the these starting files for us, I typically just create a new Java project in here, okay? And we'll make it something like why don't we call it like sorted aisle Bob's Mart, something like this. I'm going to use some pretty recent JDK. I think about a week ago, JDK 14 came out. I just installed that this morning. I haven't had any problems with it so far. It's already available for general release, so this is not a beta or anything. So it'd be fine to use that, or really anything since 10 or 11 is fine. I do typically create separate folders for my source and class files, and I typically do not create a module file for projects like this one. I do like to be able to to spell things correctly. So let's see if I can fix that real quick. Not, it almost looks like sodded, but it's not quite spelled correctly either way. So let's pick one or the other. Okay, cool. Now, since we want to download these files, I like to go ahead and open up by doing show in System Explorer. And I like to go ahead and open up on the file system where these things belong. Okay, they're going to belong in this source folder, right? So then I'll come here. These are purple because I started this as well at 9, but I just want to start over again in case any of you are dialing in now. And so let's see. Let's go ahead and save link as. Let's see the aisle. I want to put it into this empty, currently empty folder. Okay. So yeah, let's save aisle there. Let's just go ahead and save each one. Boom. Okay. Hello. It's unhappy with me. What did I do? Can't. Sure, replace it. Okay. Customer. I already got customer. Okay. What is happening? My, so I've got aisle, limited aisle, and customer. Great. Now I'd like to have Mart simulation. Okay. I think I was just pressing too fast or something. Alright. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got my files there. Let's go ahead and refresh our project. Another nice thing, unfortunately, you have to remember to do this every time you create a new project in Eclipse. One quick thing I can do just to calm that down a little bit is I can just open each one and use my Control-Shift-F or Command-Shift-F to run my auto formatter to get it more in line with our style guide. And after running that command and saving each file, I'll expect to have many fewer warnings so that I can take this output down here more seriously. Okay, cool. Now what? Well, let's take a look. We need to create a new class, okay, and it's going to be called sorted aisle. Let me copy that. And it's going to extend aisle. Okay, no problem. New class. Sorted aisle. Extends aisle. I don't know if you noticed, I used my control space like autocomplete command. I don't like to fully type out existing names. I like to, wherever possible, use the autocomplete to make sure not only that I don't have a typo, but that I'm not making any incorrect assumptions about which references are available in particular screens, right? So there's my sorted aisle, okay. It's mad at me right off the bat, right? It's mad because aisle, if you notice here, it says it does not define the empty constructor. And so that means that I need to go ahead and define a constructor that would match the one in aisle. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, sure, Eclipse. All right, and it's generated one for me. What does it do? It's generated one for me here that expects a random generator to be passed in. And if we go take a look at aisle, we'll see that the only constructor that aisle has defined by checking our little cheat sheet outline over here is the one that expects a random generator to be passed in. Okay, so that's fine. How do I go back to wherever I was? Okay, is there a shortcut for this control something? Probably command square bracket. Okay, sure, and that one is Control Q. Never doing that. That sounds like quit. Okay. All right, great. So we've done that. Now, how is this sorted aisle going to be accomplished? Okay. Well, we're going to override add customer so that every time a new customer is added, the entire list of customers is sorted. Now, that list of customers, let's just remind ourselves by looking at our parent class again. Our list of customers, right, is going to be line, right? That's an array list of customer, okay? And we're overriding add customer, which you'll notice is void and it expects a customer. In fact, it might be good for us to go ahead and just steal some of that doc and things so we don't have to write it up ourselves. Cool. Now, the one thing is I would like to explicitly let the compiler know, hey, I'm expecting to override something here so that if I had actually had a typo or something in here, it could let me know. It would say, hey, you said this was an override, but it's not actually overriding anything. And I'll say, oh yeah, that's because I accidentally hit backspace in the wrong place or something, right? So this is going to add a new customer to the back of the line. This is going to add a new customer. It's just going to add them to the line and then sort the line such that the customer with the least items goes first, right? Not very fair, but that's how this one works according to the spec, right? Okay. Cool. So the first thing we need to do is add to the line, but of course if we look at the IO class, you'll see that in this case, the line itself, right, is a private member that we don't really have access to, okay? So there's a few ways to get around this. I think a fine way to work on this is just to call this superclass's add customer method at the beginning of our own specialization, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, but we haven't done any sorting yet. All right, so what's this sorting stuff about? Okay. It's other reference for us here. So the idea behind this is, look, we know that we want to end up with the customer who has the fewest items at the beginning of the list because that's what the spec says here they're going to cut. But as we read on through the specs, they say, hey, use collections.sort here, right, to sort your array list. And the point of that is that we actually have something pretty cool going on in a lot of different SDKs like Java's, which is that well before we ever came along to decide to build Bob's Mart and a customer interface and everything, the JDK said, you know what, I can make sorts for you, right, already, all right? And what kind of sorts, right? So later on, perhaps in like a data structures class or something, okay, let's take a quick look. I don't really want to hear whatever dumb music they put to this. You will hopefully implement some of your own sorting. Okay, so you can see here there's like 24 different names of sorts. Top left is selection, then insertion, etc. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can actually sort a list of items. And knowing how that's done and some of the different benefits of doing it different ways can be very valuable. But you know, at this point in the class, this is not our goal. Our goal is just to not to implement a sort ourselves, but to have used one to have a sorted result. Okay, and so why don't we take advantage of, you know, Java's existing sort, as they say, right? So like we're going to use collection.sort right there. Okay, and if we follow that link for a second, let's just give ourselves an idea of how this thing's going to work. Okay, sort. So it's going to sort the list. Okay, all elements in the list must be mutually comparable. Okay, let's see. Oh, this is not the one we care about right now. We really care about what it's going to tell us in a moment, which is the compare to. So let's go ahead and follow along, and we'll do our collections.sort. Sort. Thank you. And we're going to sort what? We're going to sort the line. Okay. Now, if you'll notice, sort, let me put it here for a moment. Sort is a void method. Okay, so I'm not capturing the output of sort anywhere, and in fact I can because it's void. So how exactly is this supposed to work out for me? If I sort the list and then I don't keep track of that sorted result, you know, how can I expect this to work in my use case? Well, it turns out that collections.sort actually modifies the parameter. So by giving it the line that belongs to our superclass, that's our line here for our sorted aisle. And so this actually is a mutating method that will sort the line that we've passed in. So that's pretty great. This particular error that we see, if we take a look at it, it says, I don't know how to sort customers. Okay, what's that about? Well, as we read along in our specs here, we can see that it says, well, this method only works when the items in the list, which are customers in our case, implement the comparable interface, right? Okay, so we'll need to modify the customer class. No problem. Let's pop over there. I'm going to just hold down Control or Command and click on this thing, and I need to modify it. All right. Now we can implement comparable. All right. As you read on in the class specs, it suggests that there's a few ways that you can write this. I like to use the generic version, where I actually let it know what types I expect customers to be comparable to. And so I go ahead and throw customer in the angle brackets there. Okay. Now I save my file and if you notice down in my errors, I no longer have an error over in my sorted aisle. All right, let's take a look. In sorted aisle, my collections.sort line is happy with me, but right here in customer, as soon as I add this implements, it's mad again. So let's comment that out for a moment and let's see that customer is now happy, but again, sorted aisle is not. And if I add my implements line, then sorted aisle is happy and customer is not. What's the problem, customer? Well, if you want to say that you implement the comparable method, then you have to have a compared to method. All right, fine. Let's add that. Okay, if I hop down to the bottom, I can see that we've got a generated compared to stub here. Now, shoot, what is this thing? All right. We look at the doc, which we can quickly do by hovering here, or you can pop over to the Java doc, for the JDK. What it's telling us is that when you have two different customer objects, right, this compare to method should return a negative integer when this object, as compared to O, the other object, comes first. And if you recall from our spec, which you can still see on the side of the screen there, the customer should come first when they have the fewest number of items, right? So for our purposes, we should return a negative number when this customer has fewer items than customer O. We should return 0 when this customer has the same number of items as customer O. And we should return a positive integer when this customer has a greater number of items than customer O. All right, so that's why the JDK is able to implement a sort that will work for us, because they are assuming that anything that we want to use their method to do the sorting for will give us this little hint of how we know for just two particular objects which one comes first or second in sorting. And now that it knows how to compare any two objects in our collection, it can actually sort the whole collection for us. Okay, so now it's our job to satisfy our end of the contract here. Let's make sure that we're returning the right values. So I don't want to just randomly return 0. Thank you, machine. Instead, right, I want to say that if this customer has fewer items than customer O, return negative, right? You gotta spell it though. Whereas if this, I don't really like this situation right here. Okay, if this customer has where are we at? More items than customer O. It may be one of you asking a question on Twitch, and I'll try to. Okay. Try to answer you if you're still there. Return positive, else return negative, right? Or Already returning good. Cool. So let's do it. How do I know whether this customer has fewer items or not, right? Well, if you notice in our right sidebar over here, okay, yeah, sorry, the question was what video were we watching for that quick sort visualization? So let me add that to the comments here of our compared to. Quick watch of sort visualizations. Which you can also find pretty quickly if you search for like visualized sorts. But I can also put this in the chat logs for everyone. Okay. Cool. All right, so as we can see in the right sidebar, we know our num items. So let's just go ahead there and do num items. Now, is num items, right, going to be this customer's number of items or customer O's number of items, right? It should be obvious at this point in our class that when I want to refer to it directly, that's quite the same as if I do, you know, this dot num items. And so indeed, it is not the num items for O. It is for me. So let's say if we have less than, oh, and that seems great. So let's format some things up. And oh, you know what? Let me keep trying to take advantage of my comments here. We need to return a positive number. I'm just choosing one here. It really does not matter. So you can choose your favorite one. Oh, I lost my little positive comment there. Whoops. All right. And finally, if we get this far, then we should return 0. The else is sort of implied at this point since the other ifs have returned. You're welcome to write it out. All right, so having done this, you see that my errors are now gone. I just have these four couple warnings here. Okay, so we did it. All right, so once we've completed that, what can we do now? Now we should modify the Mart simulation to use sorted aisle, right? So that we can try this thing out. Okay, so let's do that. I don't want to have to keep like reopening my package explorer over here, so I'm going to use a Control Shift T or Command Shift T hotkey here just to open a type, and I want to pop over into the Mart simulation. The Mart simulation. So let's launch that. And in the Mart simulation, I will look for places where it says limited aisle, right? And so why don't I refactor this thing? I don't know about rename. Let me see if I can do it. Let's see. There's all kinds of fun that Eclipse will do for us in here. I don't want to extract this or this or this or that. I would, but yeah, let's just see if I like rename. Yeah, I don't really care about the name of this thing actually, so that's too bad. So here I want to use a sorted aisle. Okay, which is great. So now what? Well, now I got some errors. So let's fix the errors. All right, so first of all, add is mad because it's expecting a limited aisle. No problem, add. All right. Who else is mad? Oh, we've got add aisle down here that's being given a limited aisle. No way. Oh shoot, what's going on now? Well, it turns out that a limited aisle has a max length and a sorted aisle does not in the constructor. And so I'm just double clicking on each error, and most of them are just simply changing, from limited aisle to sorted aisle. Now, personally, my sort of coder, spidey sense is going off whenever I'm going through and doing a bunch of find and replace like this. Okay, so if you're finding yourself doing a bunch of copy and paste, find and replace like this, probably you could make a better improvement to the way your code is written. But spoiler alert, that's what's going to come later in this lab. So I'm just going to kind of roll with this simple approach for now. It's not so hard to replace, 10 instances or so. Okay. All right, looks like we have accomplished that. So why don't we try to just run the driver now, which in turn will set up the simulator and everything. Let's run that. And I'll expect it to, I don't really want that now, thank you. Yeah, it popped over to the console down here, and it says, okay, you've got the average wait time is down at 6 minutes, 7 minutes. That's pretty cool. Our maximum wait time, we had somebody waiting 5 hours. Okay, now it says make sure it works correctly. Well, seems okay. Using the sorted aisle should result in a relatively short average wait. 7 minutes, I don't know. I guess that's okay for a grocery store. But very long longest waits. Well, indeed, that occurred. Because that's the people with more items. Okay. Now we can also, so we can also use these test classes. So why don't we go ahead and save those out into our project as well. Having done that, of course, we'll need to refresh our project. All right. Now these actually have the annotations in here that helps AutoLab give you points. So that can just help you know how much, relatively how much each of these tests are worth. But unfortunately, it's unlikely that you'll be able to run with those. So sorry that you'll have to go and remove those as I'm doing here. Okay, so we don't want any of that stuff in there. Let's save that. Let's format it. Okay. And it's still mad. Why is it mad now? Well, now it's mad because I haven't added JUnit yet. So, okay, cool. Customer's happy. Let's go back to my problems over here. Okay. Pop that out of there. And let's tell it indeed. I don't need you to do this work. Thank you. Okay, cool. Got rid of the errors at the very least. You know what? Why don't we go ahead and tell it to run our tests this time. Cool, our test passed. I didn't even read the test. Did they make any sense? Let's just take a look. The customer test has test compare less, compare greater, and compare equal. What does that mean? Well, it makes a customer with 15 items. It makes a customer with 30 items. And we're going to assert that when we compare to the two customers, customer 1 compared to customer 2, right? We expect to get a negative value because customer 1 has fewer items than customer 2, right? Compare greater. So we set up the same customer 1 and customer 2, 15 and 30, except this time we're going to be asserting that we should get a greater than instead of a less than. Okay, seems good. And lastly, we'll do the same. We'll do two customers that are quite similar, except we need them to have the same value, 15 each. And we'll compare that actually the result coming back is 0. So that's great. Last, if we go back and check the sorted aisle test, this has exactly one test method in it. And this test does what? It says, well, I've got these couple of customers. All right, customer 1, customer 2, customer 3. You can see them created in the setup method, which importantly has that before each annotation. And what is it going to do? It's going to say, look, I need a customer with 50, right, 10, and 20 items. Okay. Then we're going to add those customers to the aisle, okay, to the sorted aisle that we have. And as we add them, we add customer 1, add customer 2. We should expect, having added customer 2, that actually customer 2 is in front of customer 1 despite coming to the line later, right? So how do we know? Let's make sure that customer 2 is the object that we get out when we get the first item in the line after adding both customers, right? So this assertion says, right, the customers should be sorted by number, blah, 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 fewest items at the front. And so even though customer 1 was added first, customer 2 has fewer items, so we expect to find it at the beginning, position 0 in the list. Likewise then, we expect customer 1 to be at the other position in the list, position 1. Now, let's go ahead and add customer 3. Customer 3 has 20 items, right? So customer 3, we expect to be in the second position because it's the middle number of items. So let's now assert that the 3 customers are each found in the 0, 1, and 2 positions respectively. So we expect to find customer 2, then customer 3, then customer 1. Let's check it. Customer 2 at 0, customer 3 at 1, and customer 1 at position 2 in order. Perfect. Okay. So those look like pretty good tests to me, and we pass our test, so that's we're doing great. Now what? Well, let's take a look. Right? What could we have done instead? So I'm going to kind of stop here and help you with that individually if you have any questions. So far, the only question that I've had in the chat was just about the reference to that YouTube video. So I've shared that in the chat. And yeah, so I'll be remaining here looking out for your questions on Mattermost. Oh, and it looks like we've got one student popping into Zoom. Oh, but there he went. So, okay. I'm going to turn my mic off. If you need anything, just chat me and I can get back. If you do want to follow along and listen with me, I'm going to post my little Spotify thing over here so you can see what music I'm about.